Hello, friends. Tricia Goyer here, and I'm here with my friend Meg Apperson, and we have a super cool thing going on because her book releases tomorrow. Sky Full of Stars. We're going to be talking about this right now, learning to surrender to God's perfect plan. So, Meg, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Meg, and I'm married to my husband Cody, and we have four kids, 11 and 6 and 5 and almost 2. And yeah, we are a homeschooling family. My husband's in the military, and we are just taking care of those little people. The book is about mostly my daughter Avery, who's our third child.
Hmm.
So you'll see her name a lot, and she is medically fragile, very special needs, pretty profoundly disabled, but she's a joy. So that's kind of
She's a sparkle. Every time I see her in your newsfeed, she's a sparkle. I
something.
love it. I was just going to read just the first paragraph of the inside flap. And it says, "Do you trust God?" Meg Apperson grew up having a relationship with Jesus, and she always trusted God. But it wasn't until her daughter Avery, a miracle in so many ways, was born with a litany of life threatening birth defects that she began to fully understand what it means to trust Jesus with everything. And the book is so encouraging and inspiring. You talk about just the challenges of a medically fragile child and then marriage challenges, like all the things that just come, well, generally in life. But when you have these odds, um, talk a little bit just about, and I do want to mention that I interviewed you for my podcast, where we're going to go into a lot more detail on that podcast. It'll be releasing Friday at walkitoutpodcast.com. But I do want you to just share just your heart on how life changed and how God changed you in the process of just being a mom to Avery and then just life in general.
Hmm. Yeah. So life in general, we were a homeschooling family, had 2 kids, and very traditionally abled children. Very ordinary. And
Yeah.
we found out toward the end of my pregnancy with Avery that she was going to be born with some pretty devastating birth defects, and we only knew so much. So we went into her birth really with just a very small bit of information about
Mm.
how our life was going to change. And when she was born, we could see in her face immediately that this case was way more severe than anyone had prepared us for. And, you know, we just had no idea at that point. Looking at her face, we knew this is not simple, craniosynostosis like we had maybe thought. This was going to come with way more surgeries, airway issues. And so at that point, everything kind of just went dark, just no idea how to go forward, just knowing that, we believed in God. We knew that, he had made Avery on purpose for a purpose. And in my head, I knew that very, very well. And yet having Avery, that information really had to go from my head to my heart, to really become a core belief that I thought I had and that I probably really did have. But it's only when it gets tested to the point of, like, are you willing to commit this child back into God's hands if he takes her at any time? It was that kind of, you know, she was born and she went to the NICU, and just everything changed. Like, we lived apart for most of her first 18 months, probably. She lived in the hospital, having surgery after surgery, complication after complication, and it it was. I mean, even to read my book now on this side of things, as the
Hmm.
one who lived it, I just look at it, and sometimes I have to ask Cody, my husband, like, did this really happen? Is this real? Like, it's so extraordinarily bad and
Yeah.
extraordinarily good. It's really crazy. And so, in having no idea how to go forward, I'm somebody who really likes to, have a plan, know where I'm going, kind of know all the eventualities, anything that could happen. And so I couldn't prepare anymore. I couldn't plan because I had no idea what was happening. And none of the doctors had any idea either. So, just kind of walking blindly in a lot of ways. And that really strengthened this muscle of faith that said, I believe that you're walking in front of me and beside me and behind me and hemming me in so that I can walk into the dark and and believe that you still have me, you still have Avery, you still have our family. And whatever happens, even if Avery goes home sooner than
Mhm.
any of us would have liked, you are still good. So,
Yeah. And I was going to mention too, if any of you that are watching, I see you out there. If you have any questions or comments for Meg, feel free to type them in. If not, I'm just going to ask all the questions. So, and I think what's hard with children is like we often feel so helpless. Like we don't, oh, Emily said so good. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what to expect. And the closest thing I have that can relate to you is and I was a teen mom.
mm,
My oldest son, I had him when I was 17, and when he was 4 months old, he got spinal meningitis. I had gone to the pediatrician. They said, "Oh, he just has colic," and I ended up taking him to the ER the next day, and he had to have like a stent put in his leg because he had no fluids, air flown to a children's hospital. Here I am, 17, with this little baby, like flying in this plane. But that feeling of helplessness, which my thing is like this big compared to like all the things you face, and I
no,
think
it's huge.
how is it that feeling of helplessness for you, knowing like, are we going to get past today? I can't can't even think about tomorrow or the next thing because I bet so many times it was just, what about today?
Yeah. Yeah. Helplessness is not a state that I enjoy.
Hmm.
It is definitely something I fight against with everything in me. I want to be prepared. And I really, you know, that became, it's a good thing to be prepared to plan ahead, but it kind of became, I realized, an idol in my life, a coping mechanism where, in stress, when I felt helpless, I would feel like the walls were kind of closing in, and so I would want to do more research and I would want to know more, and it became kind of this frantic way of coping that had nothing to do with relying on God, because I still really wanted to do it in my own strength. Helplessness just really highlights my weakness, and
Yeah.
it's not comfortable. So
Yeah, and I think so many people, like whether it's a pregnancy or a job or the year, like we think we have a plan for how things are going to go, and that feeling of helplessness, like I can't even plan like tomorrow because I don't even know. I think so many people are facing that right now, which I think your book is coming at a perfect time because the subtitle says learning to surrender to God's perfect plans, and we all have these plans, and it's that when we're helpless, it's learning to surrender. And in the process of adopting older kids from traumatic situations, and like every day I'm like, I just need your strength for the next hour. Like there's so much going on right here. So what were some of the ways that God showed up during that time when you did have to surrender and when you did feel helpless? How did he show up?
so I had this belief, that it was all on my shoulders, that if I ever
Mm,
became helpless, that if it ever became too much for me, then everything would come crumbling down, and everyone, I would fail everyone. And so it was just this very egocentric, like, I have to carry this. This is all, I'm in charge here. And I think, one of the ways that he showed up was bringing me to a point where I was helpless. I
mhm,
couldn't go any farther in the journey with Avery. And yet everything was still all right, and I had nothing to do with it.
mhm,
And so it was this realization of, like, I'm not her comforter. I can't comfort her,
mm,
in the way I would comfort an ordinary, a traditionally abled child. I can't comfort her or communicate with her all the time when she was a baby. And so, um, you know, him letting me reach my limitations
mhm.
and watching everything still go on, and realizing I am not as important to this process
Yeah.
as I think I am or as I want to be. And, he really was just so faithful to carry her and to bring the right information that maybe I hadn't always been the one searching for all the time. And so to just look and see how he had orchestrated it, in the economy of God, all timing is serendipitous.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you can't force it, you can't push it, you can't even advocate enough sometimes, outside of his timing. So I think a lot of the time he would show up by showing me how small I was.
Mhm. And I think that's the amazing thing about God is like he wants to show us more of himself.
Mm,
And sometimes it's like the places where we don't want to be, that's where we discover it. We
yeah,
discover more of him than we ever imagined possible. And I mean, I just remember times like I'd have a raging teenager, because she faced trauma in the past, and just sitting there and praying, like, can you just please calm her? And then all of a sudden she calms. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, you legit just like heard my whispered prayer right now. And just those times where I never wanted to be in these type of situations. You never wanted to be so helpless with Avery, but God does show up in ways that are amazing. And
yeah,
then we just like want to tell others. And I love that now this is your like testimony, like this is what God can do. And if he could do
yeah,
this for me, he could do this for you. And I think that means so much. And that's what I want to talk about too, is like the power of story. And like now you're able to share the story of God's goodness in ways, if life would have gone like you wanted it to or you planned, you wouldn't have this story that can impact so many people. So, how has just the chance to share the story really just even changed you in the process of writing it?
yeah. So that's a good question.
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't send me these to prepare, so this is a great practice. Um, yeah. So, I will say it's a double-edged sword for me.
Mm,
And that's in the book. I think it's kind of toward the end. It really was so encouraging. I had a blog before
mhm,
Avery
mhm.
was born, and I was just sharing drivel. I don't even remember what I was sharing, like potpourri recipes. Like thinking that I was contributing to the world. Not that there's anything wrong with
Yeah.
those, but just really thinking that I was doing whatever. And after Avery was born, I was not writing for an audience. I was
Mhm,
sharing on my blog because it was efficient, because I knew I could communicate with everybody that
mhm.
wanted to know about Avery. And she was still really young when people started sharing the story, and so I would get all these messages, and that gave me this sense of like, oh, this story isn't just about me. The story is not about
Mhm.
just Avery. There's a collective story that's happening, and you know the faithfulness of God is universal. And so
Yeah.
telling the story about how he'd been faithful to us, to Avery, um, you know just translated to everybody's life. They didn't have to have a special needs child, or medically fragile, anything like that, and yet it still was really relevant. And so for a long time, that was very encouraging. That gave me a sense of purpose. I felt like, oh, you're using this. This
Mhm.
is good. You haven't just brought us here to the wilderness to drop us off and leave us here. This is about the story of, here we are going through the wilderness to the promised land, and trusting God about whatever that promised land was going to look like. And so on that side of it, for a long time, that was something I really held on to, that just blessed my heart and kept me going. And then I realized, I guess a few years in, that it was also something I had done, something I had clung to, that had prolonged my grief in a lot of ways.
Mm.
I was so, I had almost made an idol out of purpose,
Mhm, mhm.
the silver lining that, oh, God was going to use this and everything was good. And so I used it as a way to like downplay my grief,
Yeah.
downplay the pain, that I still needed to say, this was horrible. And so when I realized that, like, wait a minute, I have made the purpose, the fact that people are being reached, the fact that there's goodness here, I have made that the goal, and not just the the goal, the point of communing with Jesus in my suffering, you know?
Yeah.
And, it is a great thing to always focus, not always, maybe that's the wrong word, to focus on the good. But, when the good becomes the focus, when the good becomes the goal instead of just Jesus,
Mhm.
there can be a little trickiness there.
Yeah, and I think when we're feeling like, okay, this is what's happening, but this is a lesson I'm getting. And
Mm,
then this is what's happening, and this is a lesson. I do this so much in my life too. And then it's like, okay, maybe it's not about the lessons, it's about just God. It's
yeah,
just about being with him
yeah,
and realizing he's here for me and realizing that, even if life is hard, that we have eternity to look forward to. Like there's so many things instead of just the lessons. And I'm so much like a teacher, like, this is what I learned, and this is what you're gonna get out of it, and this is how I'm gonna help you. And some days I'm like, I just don't have anything. And it's like, okay, finally, we're here. We're here at the place where you don't have anything, and it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I realized if this had all happened on a desert island and there had been no Instagram and no blog,
Hmm.
would I have still been okay? Would Jesus have still been enough, even if no one was saying, "Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story. This means so much to me." Would Jesus still have been enough? And when I realized
Mm,
I need to make sure that's the case,
yeah.
I need to make sure that getting positive feedback is not more important than you know.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so good.
So
Okay, so tell us about your family now, and like how old is Avery? Because I'm sure, I mean, we definitely want them to go and pick up the book and read it. But let's just give a update on Avery and your other kids and what's going on in your life today.
yeah, so I think the book ends with Avery as a 4-year-old. So last year, we had a big family trip that kind of wraps up the book at the end. It's a very idyllic ending, um, and that was all lovely and good. We ended on a high note, and we're still at a high note, but there have been some low notes
Mm,
in between the ending of the book and now, like any story. So where we are now, we are we are doing well. So in the summer, Avery has had all of these symptoms, just years worth of symptoms, and I took her to her neurosurgeon, and we knew that she was going to need another surgery. We knew that there
mhm.
were a few more that we needed to do, and we didn't really have a timing for that, and so I took Avery to see him and kind of gave him a list of the symptoms that Avery was having, and they had said we need to do surgery. We need to do a big surgery. We did more imaging on her head, and just realized that we needed to do something pretty big to intervene. And so in September, we did a surgery that was really. I'm still shocked that we did it. I'm still shocked at
Mm,
what surgeons can do to children's heads. So that was by far the hardest surgery that Avery's been through, and the recovery was miraculous and horrible all at the same time.
mhm.
Like a lot of
Yeah.
things. And she's doing pretty well. She was released early, and kind of the things that we were worried about happening mostly didn't happen. So we are all feeling very good. She has some hardware in her head right now that is giving us fits, but
Mm,
it's safe at the moment. So
yeah.
that is, we are just thrilled about that, and um, just hanging on. She can get the hardware out in December, and so like right now it feels a little tenuous. We've gone through periods of that with her, and really having a child like Avery is always kind of
Hmm.
tenuous. Every
Hmm.
day is a little bit of a mystery. It's always wondering what could possibly happen. So we're there with her right now, just watching, being cautious. Um, I have made a habit of doing this since she was little because her structure is so interesting. I kind of have to study her, like every part of her head. I have to feel everything and make sure that she's okay. So we're in that stage of just watching very, very closely.
Yeah.
And otherwise, we're homeschooling again. That has been so great. My second child, my daughter, went to public school last year, and then with the decisions not to open up school, it was like, I know how to do this.
We've done this before. Yeah.
Add to the student list. So that has just been, it has been so sweet and such a nice way to recover with Avery, to just have all the kids home and doing that. So
Yeah. And I think I mean, again, so many people are being thrust into homeschooling.
mm,
They feel that uncertainty. Am I doing this right or what? And it's like, okay, we can do this, and we can be more relaxed about it. We know that it'll work out. It'll be okay. And I think that does help having that knowledge of homeschooling, and then the chance that all your family can, she's recovering, but you're all together. And I think that is something super special that you can have as a family. Okay, now let's talk about book launch.
Yeah.
Your book is releasing tomorrow, which is so fun. And I always like to think like, because this is the funny part, like, what does your family think about the book, about the launch, about everything that's happening?
So, like my children,
Yeah.
yeah, they are they are hilarious. So they have watched me kind of walk this book writing process out for like 3 years. So to
Hmm.
them, they're like, whatever, my mom's writing a book. This is totally normal. Like, no one cares, you know. My husband has not read it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think my husband's read maybe three of my books. So.
He has it. He's just thrilled to pieces about it. Like he has it on his desk at work, just so that people can see, Apperson on the side of
Yeah, exactly.
like, the last name. He took it to work the other day because he was like, "I'm gonna read it. I need to read it." I'm like, "You're in it. You should probably have read it a long time ago."
Yes.
I gave him the option, before you say, before I say to the publisher, "This is good," do with it what you will. You should
Yeah.
probably read it. And he didn't. So.
Yeah. Oh, I've had
A
kids
lot of
come
other
back to me
people
and
did.
like some of my kids are like, "Why did you write that about me?" And I said, "I told you you need to read it."
Yeah,
If you
yeah, I'm pretty good.
No, but I knew that was probably gonna be the response because my kids are like, "Oh, cool, a book,
Yeah,
whatever. Like, what's for dinner?" So it is so like the world. Look at my book, and then the kids are like, "What's for dinner?"
yeah,
And I need new socks or
yeah,
whatever's going
totally
on.
moved. Avery is excited. The cover is, a picture of a little girl. It is not a picture of Avery. Avery
Hmm.
seems to believe that it is a picture of her. I don't know what memory she has of someone taking a picture of her on that park bench in the dark, but she really is probably the most excited about it. She says to people, really anyone that's around her, "My mom wrote a book about me."
That is so awesome.
She
I love
did.
that.
She did do that. So.
I love that. Yeah, I have one child that like whenever she's in a new situation, I think that's the thing that she hopes people make her feel like she's cool or something. Like she's like, my
Mhm.
mom writes books, and she was on the red carpet, and you know, just because I wrote the novelization of Mom's Night Out. Like I didn't even write the movie. I wrote the book that goes with the movie, and I got to go on the red carpet. But like anywhere, we'll go to a new Bible study, and they're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "You were talking to my daughter, weren't you?" Like it really isn't that impressive. So all my other kids are like, "Whatever," and then she's like, "This is the introduction about,"
That's it. So yeah.
just so you know.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's the fun part of balancing. Like this is real life, and this is the creative life, and real life is still there, and real life is still going on. And
Crazy. 2 hours ago, I was sitting outside, on the back deck, and they're all playing baseball or whatever, and getting eggs out of the chicken coop, and the dog is eating everything that is left out on the ground. I'm just thinking like, I have a book coming out tomorrow, and this is what I'm doing. Like making
exactly,
breakfast and lunch, and it's just not special or glamorous. It's just normal life, and yet you also need to work on the weekends and write.
exactly, yeah, that's what people like. It is like, okay, I need to like get up early, or I need to stay up late, or I know you guys are doing this, but I'm gonna have to go write for a little bit. I mean, did you find yourself doing that, like writing in the snippets of life?
I did. So I really have to kind of be away. I had to like
Mm,
sit down and have several hours. So I would write on Saturdays and Sundays for about 6 months. And the edits happened more organically, just,
hmm.
here and there as I could fit it in. But I am, I just don't enjoy writing in like 15-minute blocks, unless I'm writing like a blog post. But to stay in the
Right.
arc of the book, it was like, this is too much. I need like 3 hours. So we did that.
We just need writing cabins, like somewhere, like
Oh, oh my word.
a couple miles away from our house. Or like, I'm going to the writing cabin
That
today.
would be helpful. Yes.
I know, and we usually don't get that. So
No, I wrote the book sitting on my bed in the back with children like knocking at the door or like
yeah,
sticking their fingers underneath the door,
yeah,
like, "Mom, where are you?" Right where I always am. You know what I'm doing. You know where I am. Talk to your dad.
Yep, I love that. I love that so much. I've written in the front seat of our 12 passenger van as we're going on vacation, and I didn't have my book done. And I'm like, okay, people, my headbuds are in. I'm trying to ignore you, but we're finishing this book. So,
That's amazing. That is commitment.
yeah. Oh, now I'm curious to hear, have you got any feedback yet about the book or people that have like read it, early copies?
Yeah. So first, I started with um, my my parents and
Mm,
close family, really to make sure that they had the same perspective on some things that I did. I write
mm,
about some tough stuff, and I didn't want it to only be my perspective. Like we all have our memories and the way we know things to be, and so I wanted to make sure that I had that I ran all my memories past other people, if that makes sense. So I did that
yeah.
first, and they just loved it. And then there were some friends who read it, and my question to them was like, do you feel like this is generous enough? Like you really know me and have seen my life play out over the last 15 years,
Mm,
do you think this is, because I believe it is. I was very, very um, very, very concerned with generosity and in my memory and how I wrote about
mm,
it. Like,
mm.
do you feel that this is generous enough? And they gave me their blessing on that. So that was really good. And then I've had some people who got it on audiobook a few days ago. The narrator reached out to me. She said she had to stop, for the audiobook. She had to stop. She was sobbing. I said, I
Oh my gosh.
can't read it either. I tried to pick it up earlier. It's a good thing I did not do the narrating because I can barely read a few paragraphs and I'm just sobbing. I don't This is a total wimp, but it's really not because I'm great. The story is just
Hmm.
really moving and extraordinary, and it's nothing to do with me really. It's just really crazy.
Yeah, and I just got goosebumps you talking about that because it's like so meaningful when you know that, okay, I was crying when I wrote this, and now people are crying when they read it. And it's not just crying tears of sadness, it's tears of like, look what God has done. And I
Yeah,
think that's what we want. That's what we want. Like when we can share our emotion and someone else can cry or laugh. I mean, that is the whole point of writing and sharing our story. So it's so amazing. It's so cool. And I cannot wait. You're going to have to let me know. Just when you get more and more of that, it's just so cool to see like the ripple effect of what God's going to do. And I think I really feel that like when I was reading your book and when I'm following you online, it's like the ripple effect is even greater than we can imagine. And someday I always think like we're going to get to heaven and people, we have no idea. They'll be like, my friend's cousin told me about your book and I was like down in a pit and God lifted me up. I'm like, that's going to be the best moments because we're
yeah,
never going to see all that on earth. And then for Avery to have those moments too, where, in eternity someday people will be like, your life and the lessons you taught your mom and all of us just made a
yeah,
huge difference. And that is so special.
yeah. I think it's also really, really sweet and important when people cry about a story that's not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
That it's hooked something in them. It's not necessarily a trigger in a bad way, though sometimes there can be some triggers in a bad way when you read some of the stuff, and maybe some in my book. But that a story can mean something universally to people.
Mm-hmm.
Where the specifics don't have to be the same. It's just that the way something's phrased just hits somebody where it can heal or show them that they need to heal in a place in their life. And I mean, I would just read all the time if I could.
Yeah.
I love to write. I love to write because I love reading so much. So
Mm-hmm.
other people's stories are so special to me, and how it's written is so important.
Yeah, and I love that. I think when we read a good book, it's like we're reading the story, but there's also this internal dialogue.
Yeah,
Like, oh my goodness, I felt that too, and I can totally understand that. And and we remember times when we felt that way, and the situation might not even be anything similar, but those emotions are the same, and they're all universal emotions of things we face. And so that's the sign of a good book, which you have right here. That when that internal story is going on of how we look at life and how we look at God and how we look at faith and how we look at surrender, that's going on in our mind as we're reading your story. So thank you for doing that for all of us. We really appreciate that. Now, as we're going to wrap up right now, is there anything that you just want to share to people that are listening, or just something you want to share to the viewers out there?
Something I want to share. This is a good question, and I usually what. Um, yeah, I really hope that the book. There are so many things. There are so
Well,
many.
you could share more than one. It's okay.
I hope, I think the way people view religion, I hope that this book will maybe make people just consider
Mhm.
the way they hold their religion, and maybe their memory of a religious experience that they have where they hold it based on memories that they have, and they believe maybe that God has failed them, and there
Mm.
have been other factors there. So that's something. I really hope that people come away with a sense of peace, that maybe they begin to look at their theology of, what do I believe about suffering? What do I believe about my life when everything goes wrong? What do I believe about a good God who allows pain, who allows
Mm.
consequences? Um, in the book, you see a lot of consequences for me personally. The book is not a handbook about this is how you do everything well.
Yeah.
It's not a a commentary on biblical grief. It's not that. A lot of it was that I did things very poorly and that I had poor theology that worked its way out in unbelief. I thought I believed, and it theology affects everything, right?
Mhm.
So just coming to that, I hope that the book gives people a sense of hope that everything can go wrong, and um, God really is still good, and you can do everything wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to be good or perfect. It's really about learning to trust Him, and really just being faithful where you are, and then letting Him do with your story and your obedience what He wants to do with it.
I love that so much. And it's a perfect book if you need some hope, if you need some encouragement, if you know someone that does. Sky Full of Stars. And Robin had a question. She says, "Why did you pick that title?"
That is a great question, Robin. So that's actually a good story too. So I was newly pregnant. I had no idea who I was carrying. I was just driving down the road, and it's a Coldplay song, and the song came on the radio. And I do not enjoy pregnancy. Like, I never feel like an emotional connection with my baby or anything like that during pregnancy. And I just had the sense that this song was really important to this kid. And I was like, I've never had a song for a baby before. A song for my pregnancy. That's so whimsical. That's not me. So, but I knew, like, this song is specific to this baby, and so I forgot about that for years. And I was in the process of writing the book proposal. Like, I had an idea, and so I was writing it, and I was writing on my computer, and I had like Pandora going, and the song came on, and I
That is so cool.
memory of like that song, and Avery was the baby, and here we are. And so then I felt like the Lord just like downloaded this idea of a sky full of stars, about how when everything goes about black, He is still working in goodness. There are rewards for fellowshipping with Jesus in suffering. There are things about yourself. There are things that you're passionate about that you never would have seen in your perfectly easy life, you know? So it was like everything went dark, like the horizon of my life went dark. And in that darkness, a lot of things became very clear. You know, you can't see the stars, even though they're out in the daytime, you can't see them until it goes dark. And so it was like, oh, I think this is something. And so it made
That's
its
so
way
cool.
into the proposal, and it kind of came out in some of the chapters in the writing. And yeah, people warned me, like, you're not going to get your title. Whatever you send to the proposal, they'll change it. You know, that's a thing in writing. The title you propose, you'll never get it. And they were like, no, we really like it. We really want to go with it. I said, it really meant something. It was really fate, not fate, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And
really,
you're like, I'm glad, publisher, you agree, because like God gave it to me. So
right? I wasn't sure I could say that, you know,
no.
like Jesus speaking, you know,
Yeah.
no, this was meant to be. You don't understand. But
Yeah.
that was how it came about.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, Robin said, "Wow, that's so cool." Yeah, and Lisa said, "Yes, love this." Christopher said, "Great song," and Christopher also said, "So true, Meg. Literally experienced that theology piece this year in my situation. You don't see it until you see it."
And what an
That
awful, wonderful grace of God that He makes us see it, right?
yeah.
You know, that we would never choose these things, that you
Mhm.
would never, you know, like, oh, I want to have a little girl who has to suffer so
Mm,
badly for years, and you can't do anything about it or help her. And yet I would never go back to who I was and how my life was before Avery. I would never do that just for, you know, the bonus of knowing Jesus in the valley the way I came to know him. I would never go back. You
yeah.
know? And you don't always think that at the time. You know, that's more of a hindsight thing where you move to the other side and you go, oh, all this depth, all of this richness of experience, this memory bank that you build with God where he performs miracles. And you really sometimes have to look for them. Sometimes they're very obvious. And then sometimes you have to look to experience him, but building that richness of experience is worth it.
Yeah. And even like we were talking about earlier, just our ordinary lives. I mean, I was just making tacos for dinner, and we have kids running around and playing 80s songs and trying to get me to dance because they said, "Do you like the song? Do you like this?" And I'm like, there's moments I was so heartbroken by my adoptions and just the troubles, and I'm like, this is so hard. And then we have days like today, your kids are playing on the lawn and the dog and chickens, and I'm like making tacos. It's like, this is a miracle. Like,
Yeah,
we are living miracles. And every day, when we go through that darkness, when we go through the hard stuff, we can begin to see how every day is a miracle.
yeah. And what an honor it is to be the storytellers. I
Hmm.
just feel so lucky to have been able to witness Avery's journey and to have the abilities that I have to turn that into, little words on a black and white page. I think that and I think everybody can be the teller of their story. Maybe it's not in book form, maybe it's just, sharing your story with somebody else. But I always tell people who are going through something, um, just write that down a little bit. Just prepare yourself. Whatever you're going through is not only about you. The story is bigger than you. It's meant for other things. So tell your story.
And someone else needs to hear it. That
Yeah.
ripple effect needs to go on. Oh, I love that. Okay. Christopher said, to fellowship with him in his sufferings is a powerful place to be in, a place you don't beg to be in, but when you're there and through it, to some extent, you understand it and embrace it. It's incredible how intimate you can be with the Father. So, yeah, thank you, Christopher, for sharing that. Oh, so good. Well, Meg, thank you for being here. It's fun to take a break from our normal life. The kids running around, we're like, go away, children, for
That's
30 minutes.
cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, when
Yeah.
we recorded the podcast, I could have gone on for hours,
I know. I love it. Yeah, that's going to be on. And we
chatting.
talked about totally different things, so don't feel we're doing a repeat. So we talk about
Yeah,
lots of
no,
different things.
totally different, and going back and forth. It was great. It was so much fun, and this was so much fun. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
having me.
thank you. And so, where can people, which they need to go right now, where can they go and get your book?
So you can order really any place you buy books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. I know people who ordered from Walmart already have their copy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Target, really, really anywhere you buy books. I have all the links for those in my bio on Instagram. That's usually where I am most often sharing about my life is Instagram, Meg_Apperson. And I have a blog. I do update that. I will be updating that more this month than I have in recent years. So there will be something to read there that's new and relevant. And that is forfinelives.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll put the links. I'll go in and put the links in the comments too. So they'll just have be able to go down and click. But thank you, Meg, so
Thank
much for
you.
being here.